Daniel, will you please give us a little grounding exercise to start our Cascadia Regional Call today?
Sure, this one is a short and simple one, but first I'll just invite you to sort of sit up, let yourself expand a little bit. Shake out anything that you need to. And then let your spine rise stalk-like, your head fruiting at the top. Just give yourself a moment to breathe and sit. In a second, we're going to do 3 long, voluble sighs. And as we do them, on the first, we're going to let go of whatever we were doing before this, put it to the side. On the second one, we're going to give ourselves space and just shelf for right now whatever comes after this meeting, letting ourselves be fully present. And for the third, we'll open our eyes and look at the infinite mystery of each of the different people who is here and everything that they are bringing to the table and are. So first, let's go of where we've just come from with a big inhale and an exhale. Inhaling, putting aside what comes after this meeting. And sigh. And opening your eyes and inhaling, taking a look at all of these glorious people who are gathered together. And a final sigh. Great to be here with you all. Back to you, Andra.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That was beautiful. Welcome, everyone, to our Cascadia Regional Call. This is a call that's happening every 2 weeks on Fridays. And yeah, we've got Corey 7 here on tech support today, and I'll be your facilitator. And then I'm going to post the agenda in the chat. So we're going to start next with a brief learning journey recap, check-in, and questions. So if you have a question about the recent learning journey content, or you're having any trouble with what's coming up, or have questions about the platforms, anything that's coming up for you, you're welcome to put that in the chat or raise your Zoom hand. And in the meantime, I'm just going to give a little recap of what the last webinar was about, just in case that you weren't able to be there. So this last time, Joe talked a lot about design immersions. So design immersions being really understanding that in order to understand bioregionalism, we have to experience it. We have to immerse ourselves in the design, in the work, in the landscape. And so design immersions can be as simple as hosting a film screening. Joe Brewer brought up the Water is Love film as an option. You can also go on a forest walk with a group of people and start talking about how the forest is organized, how the water moves through the forest, and just really start thinking bioregionally in your own landscape. Or it can be as elaborate as creating a bioregional tour or an eco-regional tour of your area and connecting up all of the people who are doing regenerative work in your area. And this webinar has been really inspiring to a lot of people. We've already got some design immersions planned and on the way, and I sent you an email with some of those options. I also can give a little recap of that as we do the group updates. But yeah, are there any questions, thoughts, comments, anything coming up for you about the most recent design school webinars for the learning journey? Yeah, sounds like people are doing pretty well. And 1 second here. Okay. Oh, okay, Corey, go for it.
Yeah, I have a comment. It's not about Tuesday's call or the last design immersion call, but it's about the finance labs that happen every other Friday. And I remember that last year when I was a part of joined everything, there was so much It was overwhelming. And I don't join all the finance lab calls, but I guess I just wanted to say when I have joined them, and I was again this morning, they, for reasons I'm not completely sure, but they really helped me connect a lot of the dots. What I'm hearing in the design school, what I'm experiencing here in my local area, what I'm experiencing, what we're doing in Regenerate Cascadia is the way that that Joe and Penny talk about the finance piece. For me, just does a really interesting job of connecting all the pieces. So I guess I just put that out there for input. If anyone else is on the fence about joining those calls or listening to them later, I have found them, and I haven't listened to all of them, like I said, but I found them very useful and kind of helping me think about how it all comes together. It's not just about like the money. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much for that, Corey. Very important point to bring in. And it is really valuable to start seeing how to look at economy from a non-extractivist model. And I think it's really inspiring and amazing to see all of the myriad ways that's being done right now. So yes, I believe the finance calls actually take place right before this call on Fridays. So you can join in live or you can view the recording through the design school. And just as a reminder, there is a ton of content on the design school. So please, please, please just take it at your own pace. You can just check out the webinars for the learning journey. You can, dive into the inner space as well. I would highly recommend the inner space offerings that Penny is leading for people who are wanting to build their leadership capacity and their facilitation skills. That's a really good place to start building those skills and doing that inner work that is so necessary before we start doing this big outer work. So just as a reminder, that's a really good space to join. And then there are so many offerings through the design school too. So it can be overwhelming, but really just pace yourself. And we're just grateful you're here. So thank you so much for that. Any other questions about navigating the design school or the current learning journey before we move on? All right, and then just as a reminder, you're always welcome to email me learningjourney@regeneratecascadia.com if you're having, .org, if you're having any issues with the tech for the design school or just have questions about the content. I'm here for you as a resource, so I am available. Beautiful. So we're going to shift now into our group updates. So if your group is doing any organizing and you want to share some information about what's been happening, if you have events coming up, you have announcements, or if you're just doing some land tending and bioregionalism in your local landscape as an individual, you're welcome to raise your hand and just share a little bit about that with the group. So I'll let people kind of queue up for that. In the meantime, I actually am hosting a land tending event tomorrow in Portland. And so if any of you happen to be in the area, I'll post the link to the event right here. But it's going to be a land tending event at Stevens Creek. We're going to be doing mostly pulling invasive species. We're going to be doing we recently planted some white oaks in the area, which we're really, really excited about growing. And so we're doing some work to keep the beavers from chomping those down because there are active beavers in the area. And then we're really excited because it's going to be sort of a village atmosphere environment. We're going to have a little basket weaving going on, like kids' activities. And we're bringing a lot of the neighbors in too. So it's a very, very mixed group of people, from people who do mutual aid in the community to the board president of the neighborhood association. So it's a really good opportunity to bring in a diverse group of people to meet each other, to start building this resilience network and to care for the landscape. So really looking forward to that. And then the Northern Willamette Valley and the Southern Willamette Valley groups are collaborating on an eco-regional tour that we've just solidified the dates. We're looking at September 4th through the 16th. And so that is going to be a tour from the headwaters of the Willamette River to the confluence with the Columbia River. And we'll definitely get more details about how to join that as we go. But there's a lot of exciting organizations lining up to be tour stops for that. And it should be a really good time. So as we're speaking about design immersions and options coming in, that is on the docket. So yeah, anyone feeling like sharing any group updates, any events? Yeah, go for it, Daniel.
I'll share. We had a marvelous time with Marianne Wynn this past week, beginning to do some project mapping and sort of some meta mapping and looking at about 50 different projects so far that we've discovered in Fraser Lowland that are engaged in some really cool ecological restoration work primarily. But we're happy to, we'll be documenting both those pieces of work and our process for kind of doing that discovery and sharing that with folks. I also thought I'd mention we are starting to have bi-weekly calls for Fraser Lowland on alternating Wednesdays at 2 p.m. So the first one's happening on the 30th. And again, if you're anywhere from West Vancouver over to Hope down to Bellingham, that's all within this sort of eco section. So do feel free to stop by. People who aren't in the region but are also keen to find out what we're up to and collaborate are also welcome to come by. So I'll drop my email in the links here and feel free to come by and play if you're interested.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I got to drop in on that meeting and it was really inspiring, all of the energy in the room and just all of the people who were like, oh, I know about this organization that we could talk to. And I know, oh, this one and this one. And they were starting to map it all collectively. And it was really inspiring and really beautiful moment of just like group gelling and inspiration there. So lovely. Any other group updates? Any personal land tending that you've been doing that you're feeling really inspired about? Any ideas about future design immersions? Denise.
Hi, yes. I'm working with an organization in Burien, Washington, so it's just south of Seattle, and we're having a convening. We're going to do an open space, live open space, with the topic being what does Burien need for sustainability? What are the concerns and hopes and dreams of the community? And so it's just in draft form, but it was really having that call last week was really helpful in helping me kind of put together an outline that I use to pitch to this particular group, and they want to partner with us. And so it's just at the very beginning stages, but it's going to happen at the end of May. So, and we've got a space and that can handle up to 200 people. So we're going to just be putting the word out. And I'll share it with you as soon as I get the approval from the other group that we're collaborating with. Thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah. And if that event or any other events want to come through and be on the Regenerate Cascadia calendar, there was a calendar glitch that we just fixed today. So you should be able to submit events now. And yeah, as long as you're logged in to the Regenerate Cascadia website, you should be able to put an event on there. It will go into pending status, and then I approve those in the morning. I'll accept on Wednesdays. So yeah, if you want to get your events on there, please do. We're excited about that. And over to you, Brian.
Hello, do you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm on my phone. I'm not used to this interface. Yeah, this is great. I just wanted to mention we will be hosting an event on May 4th, which is coming right up. May the 4th be with you. And it's as part of International Permaculture Day. And we will be doing, and I've done this a number of years in the past. So we're going to have a plant swap and a little bit of tour, and then a good long time at the end to just kind of sit and get to know each other and share resources, connect. We had a permaculture meetup last month, and we had a nice little circle of people from the Cascadia cohort kind of talk. And so kind of creating a space for that to happen as well. Normally we do the permaculture meetup the last Friday of the month, which is today, but I'm getting ready for a plant sale. So we're busy getting ready. So I figured put all the energy into the May 4th event. So there's information on our website, which is inspirationfarm.com under events. And then, yeah, I've been wanting to post it onto the calendar, but I did have some hiccups on that. So I'll try again this weekend and get that posted. And I know the newsletter's coming out soon, or is that passed already? But I'll try and get it.
Ryan, can you say where you are?
We're in Bellingham, Washington.
Thank you.
So yeah, Whatcom County, northwest corner. But yeah, lower BC's welcome if you want to brave the borders. And yeah, Skagit Island, San Juan, all that kind of whole region is welcome to attend. And we encourage people to bring plants or seeds or other things. It's a really fun event. We share knowledge of our local area and what plants do well, and experiences with those plants in various contexts. And yeah, it's just a good kind of casual time to work outside the normal economy and share resources and get to know one another.
Where is the event?
It's at Inspiration Farm. So we're 6 miles north of Bellingham. We've been here 30 years. It's a permaculture demonstration farm, pretty well established. So there's a lot of things to see and see in, from regenerating a bare field into a productive permaculture oasis, basically. Yeah. So, and I'll put more details. Well, details are on our website, and then I'll post those in the calendars, and I'll get it to you too, David, at transition.
Beautiful.
Welcome. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I also wanted to flag that in the chat, Terry Wild posted about the event happening, the forest immersion that is happening on Sunday, and that's also in the Skagit Valley. So yeah, check that one out if you have some space and time. And over to you, Anna. Hi, good to see you.
Hi, can y'all? Okay, I have my mobile hotspot I forgot to charge last night, so I'm on my phone in a place with not very good service. Just to kind of keep this on everybody's radars, there's not like an event coming up for this, but there's a group of us that got together after Lila Darwish's Earth Repair class. If anyone's familiar with her work, she's amazing. And we're putting together a map of like community-based bioremediation projects that will also be like a network and directory and like information hub of people who want to do bioremediation, microremediation, phytoremediation, any of that work kind of from the grassroots. So if you are involved in a project like that or interested in that and joining that network, I'm going to drop my email in the chat and just reach out to me because it feels very relevant to a lot of the stuff y'all do.
Amazing. Thank you, Anna. Could you also say your email out loud for the people who might be watching the recording?
Yeah, Anna, ANNA .Prouty, PROUTY @gmail.com.
And someone in the chat is asking if you could say the name of the group again.
The name is as yet undecided. We've toyed with some different acronyms. Something like Earth Repair Collective is kind of what it's going to be called. And the class that it came out of, if anyone's familiar with Lila Darwish's work, she led a grassroots earth repair class in the fall, and I think she might do that every year.
Awesome. And remind us one more time where that group is based out of.
We're remote. Actually, just about everybody except for one is based in Cascadia. Like I think the furthest south we've got is Portland. But there's one person in Minnesota who works with IEN and is tapped into, which is Indigenous Environmental Network. If folks aren't familiar, is tapped into their whole network. So I'm like, we really need you out in Minnesota too, because you're going to have an amazing network. But it's the goal is to be global, but I'm sure there's a lot of Cascadians who would want to be involved.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anna. And yeah, there's a request that people start by introducing where they're calling in from when they speak, just so we can get a little bit of grounding as we switch speakers. So Melanie, over to you.
Hi, I'm Melanie. I'm in Southern Oregon, specifically Ashland, land of many tribes of the past, and currently the Degilma is the one most associated with our area at the moment. So I just thought this would be a good occasion to, it may be a little early, but I'm working on a summer teaching tour for my partner in Siskiyou Permaculture, Hazel. And we're coming north. And we're planning to do a social forestry weekend workshop. I think it's the second weekend in July near Portland, and a teaching day at the Folks School up near Port Townsend, and I think we're going to do a half-day gig at Beacon Forest in Seattle. And we're also going to be in Lost Valley for a weekend, and possibly something in the Columbia Gorge. So I'll keep you all posted and put it on the calendar when it's coming close. And Hazel put a book out a couple of years ago now called Social Forestry, and is quite an inspiring elder teacher about forestry and becoming people of place. And I think you'll all find it interesting if you want to go.
Thank you so much for that, Melanie. If you all aren't familiar with Hazel Ward's work, it's amazing. Please read the book. I had the privilege of going to a social forestry camp that was inspired by their social forestry camp, and it was very inspiring and beautiful. It's actually where I met Anna. So yeah, beautiful. All right, and then David McLeod, I think you had your hand up for a minute. Just want to check in with you, see if you have anything that you wanted to bring in.
Thanks, Andra. I was going to just emphasize the event Terry Wild is hosting on Sunday, but then you mentioned that, but the information's in the chat. Sunday, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. at Rockport State Park. I'm hoping I'm able to be there. I can't guarantee that I will be able to be there, but it looks like a really wonderful potential experience there. So encourage people to attend that. I'll also just call out that on Earth Day, I attended an event here in Bellingham that was kind of a multicultural event, and it's centered around the Coast Salish, and especially the Lummi tribal people. And one of the things that they are promoting is upcoming the Coast Salish Pride Day in Bellingham on May 24th. And then there's a number of events that are leading up to that. Let's see, they're paddle events, so canoe trips to Lopez Island, San Juan Island, Orcas Island, Lummi Island, Lummi Nation. So there's a number of events from May 17th up until the big event on May 24th that the Lummi Nation people are doing. It's led by, I'm blanking out on the, Freddie Lane. I just think it's a good thing for us to support and be aware of and connect to in our Regenerate movement is to what the natives people are doing, and to support them as much as we can. Thanks.
Thanks so much, David. Really appreciate that. Wow, so many amazing things. And if that weren't enough, I have one more for you. There's a community experience week happening at Lost Valley Education Center. And I'm going to post the link in the chat. But if you're watching the recording, you can go to www.lostvalley.org/community experience week with dashes in between. And so this is a really wonderful opportunity to learn about sociocracy, about permaculture, and about nonviolent communication in a week-long setting in a gorgeous eco-village that is really dedicated to permaculture. So really, really amazing opportunity. There are scholarships available. There's work trade available. So it's a really low barrier way to get some of those skills and to experience that in community. And Anna, did you have a hand up?
Sorry, I realized it was like a private question about that event that I don't need to take up everybody's time with.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to stay on a little bit later, I'm happy to answer questions about it. I went, and I will also be helping to facilitate the one coming up in May. It's May 11th through the 17th. So we're really excited about it. All right. Thank you all. It's so exciting always to hear all of the events and all of the things sparking for everybody. So thank you for bringing all of that in. Now we're going to move into a little bit of sociocratic gesture instruction. So I started this at the beginning of our regional call series, and this is just a way to help us build our nonverbal vocabulary so that we can learn lots of different ways to participate and receive participation from others, because not everyone likes to speak directly, but gestures bring in an extra way that people can communicate. They're also easeful and fun, and yeah, just another way to keep things concise. So the first regional call, we talked about agreement. So up twinkles is one way that people say them. Sparkle fingers is another one. So yeah, that's agreement, just as a recap. I believe Daniel last time talked about if you're in agreement, thumbs up. And if you have an objection, it's a palm out, meaning that you're offering the group a gift, because like we've talked about in sociocracy, objections are gifts. You're saying to the group, hey, I really, really feel brave enough to bring to the table something that I feel like is contradictory to our mission. So that's the recap from last time, is the objection is palm out. And then it's a little hard to do on Zoom, but but you know, and then the new one that I'd like to bring in today is direct response. So in sociocracy, you're doing a lot of rounds. You're letting everyone have a turn to talk, but there are occasionally times where it's appropriate for you to jump the queue and just say like, hey, I actually have a direct response to that. I can answer that question. It's something really important. It's really important that I say it out of turn. And you want to use this sparingly because, again, the goal is to trust the rounds and trust that you will get a turn to speak. But if it's really important and really relevant, then you can give a cue to the facilitator, direct response. So you have two hands and they're moving in opposite directions. That's like direct response. I really would like to say something back to that. And you're deferring to the facilitator. If the facilitator's like, hey, actually, I think we need to wait. Can you please wait your turn? Then, you know, but that just gives the facilitator a cue that you would like to directly respond to what was just said. So I'll keep doing that. We'll just give one extra gesture and a recap of the other gestures just to start building our nonverbal vocabulary because it's fun. Okay, so moving right along, I have a little presentation for you all about the sociocratic meeting facilitation method, and also just want to spend some time talking about onboarding practices. So I have a little presentation here. So I'd also just like to remind that I am trained in sociocracy, and that's what I'm really comfortable with. But there are so many different styles of participatory governance, of non-hierarchical governance, and of facilitation methods. So this regional call is really an opportunity for you to experience lots of different versions of these models. And if you want to give a presentation or just a short talk, it can be anything for about 7 minutes would be ideal, about a facilitation method or a government structure that's really worked for you and your groups in the past, just to help people get some more exposure to it. You're very much welcome to do that. And so I'm focusing on sociocracy because, again, that's where I was trained and what I'm comfortable with and what a lot of the group spaces that I'm in are using. And yeah, so I will move right along with this presentation here. So I just want to spend some time talking about why you might use sociocracy, or specifically sociocratic meeting facilitation, and what the idea behind this method is. So in meetings, if you're having a lot of meetings where you spend most of the meeting creating the agenda, or you are kind of talking in circles, or it doesn't feel like you're getting much done, you will end up losing people. You'll lose energy. People won't want to come to the meeting. They won't feel like it's effective. They won't feel like it's fun. And so sociocracy is a way to help encourage participation, to help everyone feel like their voices are being heard, and to also encourage a culture of participation in your group space. So it really helps if from the very beginning, you're keeping these in mind so that you're creating a culture that people in your group can really sink into and feel inspired by and feel like the group is actually making progress. So another thing that sociocracy helps with is conversational turn taking. There have been a lot of studies on what creates safety in group spaces. And the number one thing was conversational turn taking. So if you're in a group where approximately every person speaks about the same amount, or at least there's a lot of trading conversations, then that space is, statistically speaking, usually a safe and productive group space. This doesn't mean that you have to force people to talk. This doesn't mean that you need to be aggressive about policing this in any way. It's just something to keep in mind, that when you have a group space where there is very successful conversational turn taking, that tends to be a more safe, a more productive, and a more fun and inspiring group space. So something to keep in mind. Another thing that I've heard that is not a sociocratic framework, but something that is a good just guideline or principle is 3 before me. So I need to let 3 other people speak before I speak, just as a good guideline to follow. Obviously that changes a little bit depending on how many people are in the room, but just as like something to keep in mind. And then, yeah, so working on efficient decision making, making it really clear what's a decision and what isn't a decision, and who gets to make those decisions. Sometimes in group spaces, those dynamics happen offline or they happen kind of in a black box somewhere. And so sociocracy is an attempt to make that all very transparent to the group and the community. And then I want to spend a little bit of time talking about consent versus consensus. So in consensus, you're looking at trying to get everyone to agree like 100%, like, wow, I think this is a great idea. Or I'm at least willing to see it through. I'm not going to stop it from happening. And you really need to get all the consensus from all official group members. And that can be really tedious because what if that person isn't there? Or what if they don't agree, or someone is blocking a lot, or there's a lot of things problems that can cause. So what sociocracy is actually is a consent decision-making model. And what that means is that, yes, I feel like I can consent to this decision. I might not love it 100%, but I can consent to this decision. And that way, if not everyone in your group is at any given meeting, then they have the opportunity ahead of time in the meeting to give their thoughts about that topic, but you don't have to have every single person in the room to make a decision, because that is just going to happen where somebody's sick or somebody's unable to respond. And so really trying to keep things moving while still getting group input in a really important way. And then sociocracy also really tries to emphasize being lean of speech. So trying to not repeat things that other people have said, trying to keep your comments to less than a minute overall, and just really trying to encourage people to speak concisely so that we can move through the meeting content effectively. So setting up sociocracy in your group is a lot. It can be really difficult, especially if you're unfamiliar with it, especially if a lot of the people in your group are really unfamiliar with it. So I just have some strategies here of things that can be useful. I also created this document recently that I'm calling Landscape Team Meeting Flows. So if you have brand new groups that are just forming, oops, here we go. And you just need some information about how do we even get started? What's the flow? What's the process? I have this document created that you're welcome to view. It has links to sociocratic meeting facilitation guides and an explanation of the roles and some information about, step 1, this type of meeting, step 2, this type of meeting, and just some possible flows for your group. This is by no means meant to be prescriptive. Please adapt it as is desired for your group, but this just gives you a way to start moving through how to build these really important relationships with your group. Because if you don't have healthy group dynamics, you can have the best bioregional strategy in the world, but your group might fall apart because they're not really developing these relationships with each other and they're not having pro-social engagement with each other. So really, really, really thinking a lot at the beginning of your group formation about how are we creating a culture of ease and participation and fun and productivity all together at once. And obviously always, always, always bringing and inviting the land into your conversations as you're thinking about all of these strategies. So starting with sociocracy, you want to have about 6 to 12 people per circle, because if you're doing rounds and you're going through questions and comment rounds on every agenda topic, you can imagine that the meetings get exponentially longer as you add more and more people. And so it's really important that you have about 6 to 12 people. That's really, you can have 5, you could pull it off with 13, but like the ideal number that's recommended is 6 to 12. And so if you have more than 12 people in your group, maybe you have 15, it might start to make sense to break into those circles that we are also talked about in the sociocratic framework. And I will post a link to the call from last time, because in that link, Daniel gave a really lovely overview of sociocratic structures. And so you could watch that video to learn a little bit more about, okay, when I'm ready to expand, when our group has more than 12 people, how do we start structuring the process and the nested scales of those group organizing strategies? So that's a good place to get more information on that. But I'm going to stick specifically to meeting facilitation for the most part. Also, getting some practice, getting some people in your group with practice in sociocracy is a really good thing to do at the beginning. I'm going to post also a link in the chat, Sociocracy for All. They have a lot of trainings, and I'm not super familiar with them directly, but the people who I know who have gone through them speak very, very highly of these trainings. And also, I would say that I'm currently working with a couple groups doing bioregional organizing in the area in Cascadia, who I've asked if they're willing to allow observers to observe their sociocratic meetings, because I think it really helps when you get an opportunity to experience it for yourself and really see how the rounds work and how the facilitation works and what that strategy looks like and how it feels like in your body. Because like Joe said in the last webinar, you can't describe really how a strawberry tastes, you just have to taste it. And so I feel like there's some amount that the sociocratic meeting facilitation, it needs to be experienced. So if you're really interested in observing a sociocratic meeting, please do email me, learningjourney@regeneratecascadia.org, and we can talk about getting you into one of those meetings. And then in your sociocratic meetings, you want to have a facilitator, a note taker, and a timekeeper. And I would highly suggest rotating these roles to avoid burnout, and also to have groups that are, as Dean Spade, who wrote Mutual Aid, says, leaderless and leaderful. In nature, redundancy is resilience. And so thinking about having multiple people with these skills, facilitation skills, note-taking skills, and timekeeping skills is really good for creating resilience in your group. And so having those roles rotate, and you can have them rotate. Lots of groups have lots of different ways of doing this. In sociocracy, I believe there's an election process for the facilitator, and then that facilitator has a period of time where they serve as facilitator, and then another election happens. The election process in sociocracy, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today, but it is really interesting. And so if people are interested in that, I can do a presentation on that at a different time, and maybe we can do some practice with that. Yeah, and then the other thing about sociocratic meeting facilitation is you do want to have the agenda prepared ahead of time. This really helps to streamline the meeting. It can create a lot of overhead for either the facilitator, or you can sometimes have a person who is the secretary who is handling the agenda. And the secretary would source the meeting agenda items from the whole group and say like, hey, please email me if you want this, if you want some time in the next meeting, and I will try to get you in the queue. And you might have a set time that your meeting is supposed to take. And so the secretary or the facilitator will go through the agenda and make sure that there's enough time in each agenda item for us to do a little bit of a presentation about what is this agenda item about, and then a question round, a comment round, and a voting round for each agenda item. And plus, you want to have a little bit of buffer at the beginning and end for meeting check-in and meeting closeout. So the agenda creation can be a little bit difficult, and especially you need someone in the group who knows the group dynamics really well and can understand the priorities of the group to say like, oh, we really need to talk about this grant that we're about to, you know, this deadline on this grant is coming up, so we need to really prioritize that. And maybe this other agenda item we could move to the next meeting instead. So also really important to have a backlog of things that you need to get to at some point that you can pull into the agenda if there's space later. Some aspects of facilitation. As a facilitator, you're really hoping to hear from every member in the group. If you're facilitating on Zoom, that might mean that you have a list of names and you just kind of like put a tally mark when they've spoken in that round so you can keep track of it. You might have people pass it on to the next person to just keep that meeting flow going. You can do a popcorn style of saying like, okay, you know, raise your hand if you want to speak. But what happens is that not everyone feels comfortable speaking, where not everyone feels comfortable trying to interrupt. And so the rounds really give a lot of trust that like, I will get a chance to speak in this moment. I just need to wait my turn. And that kind of prevents the chaos of like the popcorn style. But that's always an option. It can be more time efficient to do the popcorn style. But again, you just end up with situations where not everyone is actually speaking. Not everyone feels comfortable to say like, oh, I think I need to say something. But when they actually get called on or it's their turn in the circle, then a lot of times they're like, oh, actually, I do have something to say about it. And those sometimes are really helpful for the group brainstorming. And then, yes, this gives more opportunity for objections, which again are perceived as gifts in sociocracy. You get, oh, and then at the end of the meeting in sociocracy, and I think this is probably my favorite part about sociocratic meeting facilitation, is that there's a space for meeting feedback. This can be 5 minutes at the end of your meeting, but it's a space for everyone to do a round and say, what about that meeting went well? What about that meeting could we do better? And any constructive feedback for the facilitator. This is really helpful for the facilitator so that they can keep developing their skills. And it's really helpful because I know all of you have probably gotten off a meeting and thought, wow, that was terrible. I feel miserable. And it's really hard to address that after the fact. Like, it becomes less and less relevant over time. But if you address it at the end of the meeting and people have an opportunity to say, wow, I feel really, really inspired and I'm really impressed with your meeting facilitation style. Or, hey, I really think that maybe we all took a little bit too long in our comments and we didn't get through as much of the material as we could. So maybe just flagging that if people could be a little more lean of speech, I think we could do more organizing better. And just getting a feel for how did that meeting go, and getting a shared reality at the end of the meeting really, really helps to continue curating that group energy that you need to maintain over time to do any of this bioregional work. Similarly, you're also discouraging crosstalk. So this is the idea that like two or three people sometimes might end up getting into an argument in a meeting, or they might end up kind of derailing the meeting because they're kind of having their own conversation and other people don't feel comfortable interrupting. So the idea of the sociocratic rounds is that everyone has their turn to speak, and they're not responding to what was just said. They're speaking their own truth about the meeting agenda item. And they can respond if they need to. They can bring other things in if they need to, but it discourages the kind of like argumentative talking that can sometimes happen. And then kind of the catchphrase in sociocracy, and I think even other groups use this, and Daniel brought this in last time, but safe enough to try, good enough for now. So that's kind of talking about the consent model of decision making and how that gets pulled in. Just like, all right, yeah, this isn't my favorite idea, but you know what? I think it's safe enough to try. It's good enough for now and matches with our mission. So yeah, I don't have any objections. And that's kind of the idea behind sociocracy in a nutshell. So this is a sample agenda, and I have also a sample agenda in that team meeting flow document that I created that's a little bit more detailed. But just for the sake of this little presentation, I like to start with a grounding practice in all of my meetings, just so we can kind of like, yeah, ground, settle our nervous systems, have some group harmonizing, and really just set everything else aside so that we can be together and be present in this moment. And then we do a short round of check-ins. We really do ask that these are like 30 seconds to a minute. We don't want to spend the whole meeting in check-ins, but it's also really, really important to get a sense of what kind of energy are you bringing into this meeting? What is your context right now? How are you doing as a human being? Because if I'm feeling sick or tired and I feel like I have to pretend I'm not sick or tired, the meeting is exhausting. But if I'm just really honest about like, hey, I'm not doing so great, having some personal life issues right now, but I'm here and I'm really grateful to be here with you all, then it gives everyone a sense of where you're calling in from, what's going on with you, and how your energy might affect the group space during the meeting. So that's really, really useful. Then you might want to review previous action items. So did things get done? Did things not get done? Are there any barriers to these things getting done? And I would be really gentle about this holding. It's okay if things don't get done. We're all moving at the pace of nature. Urgency is part of the old extractivist system. So really being gentle about this, but also recognizing that we need to keep the group moving, and we want to assess barriers where they're happening and help to resolve those barriers in a kind and compassionate way if they are coming into context. Then having space in your meeting for announcements. So this could be like, hey, I'm not going to be here at the next meeting, or I have to leave early this meeting. These announcements will kind of set some context for how the meeting needs to get facilitated and get held. It can also be a time for people to bring in new information if needed that might change what you need to focus on in the meeting. Then you consent to the agenda. So you maybe write the agenda up on the board, or in Zoom, you post it in the chat and say like, hey, based on the announcements and anything else coming up, do we need to reorder the agenda? Do we need more time for things? And this should be a short process because the agenda should be created, should be ready to go. But this is just a last opportunity to kind of rearrange things or shift the time limits on things in case like there's just some group cohesion that needs to happen. And then you move into your actual agenda items. So you can have discussion topics if it's like, hey, we really need to brainstorm this thing. Let's get some group input, and then we'll come up with a proposal next time. So in a discussion topic, there's a little bit of a presentation about the topic. There's a question round and a comment round. And sometimes you'll see groups will combine the question and comment round. I think that it's nice when you have the spaciousness to separate them, but that also works, and you can kind of play with that as a facilitation strategy as well. And then you have your proposal topics, which are like, hey, we're proposing that this happens. We're going to apply for this grant. And so at that point, you do questions, you do comments, and then you do a vote. And ideally, we will have addressed everything in the question and comments round so that there aren't objections, but the voting is where the objections would come through. And if there is an objection, then the person who has the proposal and the person who has the objection become a little subcommittee, and they try to work it out amongst themselves, and they can bring it back to the group space if changes to the proposal were needed. That can happen during the meeting, or that can happen outside the meeting if it seems like it's going to take more time to resolve. Then at the end of the meeting, you can have multiple discussion and proposal topics. You might have only discussion topics. You might have only proposal topics. Those are very variable, and the time limits are going to be variable, but you just make sure that you have to include time for the presentation of the topic, the question round, the comment round, and the voting round. So 10 to 20 minutes per agenda item is pretty standard. And then reading back action items at the end of your meeting, deciding on a facilitator, note taker, and timekeeper for the next time, as well as whatever next meeting you want to do. And then that round of meeting feedback that to close out your meeting. So yeah, that is our sample agenda. I just want to pass over this slide a little bit quickly, but in sociocracy, they also talk about having defined membership. So having clarity about who is and who isn't in the group can really help hold accountability and just knowing like who's here, who's not here. And then it also helps you define your onboarding procedures. So as you're moving through, it's really important that you allow space for new people to come into this work. That helps prevent burnout. That helps further your goals. And we're going to have more and more people coming into this bioregional movement because what we're doing is so cool. We are pulling in all of this community, organizing labor, all of the environmental justice, all of the things that people really, really care about and want to see us move out of this extractivist society. So you can tell when you start talking about this, people are like, wow, that sounds so great. So we need to have structures that are built in ahead of time so we can keep bringing people into this movement. So some onboarding procedures that I've seen work really well for these volunteer-led groups are to assign the new person a point person. The point person's job is to answer any questions, to make sure that they get the Zoom links, to just help them orient to what the group is doing right now and how sociocracy works, if that's relevant. And then you might have like a number of meetings that person needs to attend before they become a full voting member. That's optional. You can decide how many meetings or if you even want that as a rule, but it can be useful to, again, define who's actually a member of the group and who's not a member of the group yet. And then I would also suggest having some kind of embodied introduction to the land, to bioregionalism, or to the work that your group is doing so that you all are coming in with the shared values around how you're listening to the landscape and how you're being with each other and how you're moving at the pace of nature. So really like an introduction to the culture of the group and to the way that the land is holding this process. and maybe some understanding of bioregionalism if they've never encountered it before. And so, yeah, I really want to think about this question for our breakout groups of how can you invite members of the public into your organizing efforts? And this is the primary question of the breakout groups. And just, yeah, really thinking about, all right, as we're organizing, as we're doing these design immersions, what is the place, what's the appropriate place to plug members of the public in? How do we invite new members into this movement? And so, yeah, I want to give this a lot of space. So we're going to do breakout groups that Corey is working on setting up for us. And so I'll put this in the chat. Also, you're going to get 15 minutes. You should be with about 4 people. So lots of spaciousness here. And you're going to determine someone to do report backs for your group. So a note taker who's also going to present when we all come back. I would suggest doing a round of short introductions. You might not know the people that you're working with. Maybe talk about where you're calling in from and what work you're doing. What's your bioregional context right now? And then really focusing primarily on this question, how can you invite members of the public into your organizing efforts? And before we go and do that, do we have any questions that I can answer before we head out into breakout rooms? All right. Yeah, and if you want to learn more about sociocracy, I'm happy to have a one-on-one call with you to help orient you. And then I'm also happy to plug you in with some organizations who are already using sociocracy so you can observe their meeting facilitation style and get more comfortable with it overall. So please do email me at learningjourney@regeneratecascadia.org if you want more sociocracy instruction. And the document I posted, the team meeting flow, has a lot of resources and a lot of information about how to structure group dynamics. So please, 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 I want to be here for you as you're doing this process. So and loop me in. All right. Corey, how are we feeling? Are we ready?
Yep, we're all ready. I'm going to open them up.
Okay. I'll see you when we come back. 15 minutes. So excited to hear about those conversations. All right. So we'll do a little bit of report backs. We have about 2 minutes, maybe a little bit more per group. So just try to keep your notes concise. But yeah, I'd be happy to bring anybody on. Any of your presenter note takers want to come in? Maybe let's start with room 1. Ben, David, Denise, Polly.
We didn't get to establish who was going to be the reporter, but I kind of started taking notes really fast because we had a report to do. So please, if anybody wants to do this, jump right in, or I'm going to go on. So yeah, I mean, we did a lot of our introductions and all of a sudden the time was gone. So we came up with a couple different ideas, just kind of throw in the pot. The open space concept of just kind of hosting an open space to just see who shows up, so to speak, with your idea and group core in mind. We definitely enjoy the idea of low pressure, simple examples, going to the river, just that is immersive and that is an onboarding process. And then, of course, we got a little more structured with the third level that you were kind of referring to, Andra, what I'm using the word concentric circles, or something around the core theme of what the group is about. But then, you know, the outer edge being newsletter subscription, for example, and going on into defining that, what is the membership, so that you really can be clear about, you know, where the expectations are, where do you start creating that accountability and expectations on how the group would function so it remains semi-stable, so to speak. So those are our 3 different things.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That's a great idea. So I'm definitely taking notes here. All right. Room 2, Brandon, Kelso, and Melanie.
I just, my transcriber went into your guys' group, as you pointed out, Brandon. So I just put in the chat, just like the very brief headings from that conversation, which you're welcome to use to spur your memory if you want to.
It's so funny. Thanks, Logan. Melanie or Kelsa, would either of you like to be our report back person? If not, I can give a summary, but
Go for it, Brandon.
Yeah, go for it.
yeah, I think we just had a brief talk, and Kelso shared a lot about kind of the onboarding process that they've been working around with the North Willamette Valley, and part of the Willamette Valley that's helping organize this really cool bioregional activation tour that they're hoping to organize in September. They've been doing a lot of work, and so, and especially when I think you have a lot of work that's been happening for a long time, then really trying to find ways to invite people into that, like rather than just like, here's everything, the total download. It's like, actually, so they've been like, helping assign point people, and then like, how do you introduce people into the culture that you've been creating through the organizing that in a non-disruptive way was kind of something that they talked about, which was really cool. And then Melanie is down in Ashland and was just talking about more from the seed group perspective that it can be really hard when you're just starting out, and it can be really lonely if you don't have other people already kind of doing this work. And so what are ways as seed groups want to start to get forming that we can really actually provide these layers of support? And how can we get those initial kind of that initial mycelium to flow and connect people together? And then I just was sharing a little bit more on a broader Regenerate Cascadia lens of just, the incredible amounts of learning and unlearning I think that people have to go through as they're stepping into these areas. And I think that's whether that's a permaculture course, whether it's any type of work that we're doing, it really is just a redefining in terms of bioregionalism and what is bioregions and bioregional mapping and Cascadia and the movement and the history, and but also starting to get out of those like frameworks of pre-existing arbitrary lines on maps and nation states and the systems that I think we all feel a little bit trapped into sometimes. And so how can we actually start to open our lenses to these whole landscape ways, but also in terms of how we relate to each other. And so how do we learn to govern and grow together? And that's why it's really cool, I think, to bring in things like sociocracy and other things of how are we actually starting to do the work to bring in those systems. So yeah, I think it was a really nice talk.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon. And moving on to group 3, Brian, Claire, Logan, Rom.
I can talk a little bit here. If I took down a few notes, it might not be completely comprehensive, but really interesting conversation here. I mean, there's different perspectives and opinions. I think Claire, you're talking about the South Willamette Valley and your steering committee there, and that you're kind of organizing around specific sectors. So there's a food system sector, housing, economic development, et cetera, and kind of bringing people into those. And correct me, feel free to jump in if I'm, misrepresenting anything. But able to bring people into those and kind of the areas that they're most interested in, and then potentially their involvement expands from there, which I think is a fantastic way to do that. Everybody brings a different passion to this interdisciplinary field. Brian, then you mentioned the Sailor Sea Guild, super cool. People getting interested there, and really, I think the thing that stuck with me was making it obvious that you'll get benefits from that, right? So being able to take home plants, make friends, have that kind of community experience, something that really pays dividends, I think, as far as building that impetus for involvement. And then I mentioned kind of from my own experience as when I was younger, my current interest in this field is largely due to hands-on experiences that I've had at a young age. So involvement in farming activities and local food production and gardening with my dad. Something that I didn't think of in time to share on that, but that I did think of just now is that I spent a lot of time in community third places, coffee shops, and similar venues like that. And if you spend time in those places, you start to get to know what people in the community, broadly speaking, are interested in. Every single one is going to have some sort of community board. Just from those conversations, you learn about organizations and opportunities to get involved that you wouldn't otherwise. So I think, living a life that's out in the community too, it's not like a specific strategy, but that is something that in general, I think increases interest and engagement with this field. So that's kind of my brief summary from our little group. Feel free to add on anything I missed.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was juicy. And moving on to room 4, Corey, Jeff, John, and Jude.
We did not do a good job of signing note taker. But we heard from Jeff and the organizing that's been going on in the South Whidbey Island, and just such a great example how things have come together over time, and there's a lag time where things are I don't know, gestating, and then the recent work that's happening in Regenerate Cascadia, things have really come together in a much more deep way. And then we heard from is it Nancy in the Vancouver, Washington, and the importance of bringing, projects, and the importance of pulling together a coalition. Otherwise, it's just projects and competition and no coherence. We heard a little bit from me as a new aspiring organizer here in Mount Vernon, and some strategies that I've tried, and we didn't get to hear from John, sadly. So yeah, that was us.
John, any thoughts you want to add real quick?
Well, I think the one thing that I would add is that I think there's a growing consensus that money is a game changer. And I think Jeff touched on the point about, what if you had X dollars? I mean, a significant amount, what would you do with it? And probably what I would have added is, I think there's incredible utility in what some people refer to as community budgeting, which is where you get a real broad cross-section together, sharing what they're doing, what their needs are, and what the priorities are. And as a community, you determine what's the best use of an inflow of funds. And you already have a plan in place. And I know it's something that Joe and Penny talk about in their experience in the past. If you already have a plan and now there's a flow of money into it, you already know where to put it. And I think Jude really touched on just the vital importance of building the coalitions, building trust, building coordination, cooperation. So I think that would be the only thing I would add. I was an itinerant group member moving between groups, so I got to that group a little bit late, but I found the conversation very, very inspiring.
Beautiful. Thanks for pulling that in. And yeah, I love participatory budgeting, very good practices. And I would also just encourage us all to think about resources more broadly, like money, yes, but also how are we sharing community resources? What do we actively have access to? And getting really creative about that. If anyone's interested in time bank or hour for hour trading, please do reach out to me, because I have a lot of information about that and ways that you can jumpstart that as a way to compensate volunteers. So all right, and then room 5, Chloe, Nicole, Pamela, Daniel.
Yeah, I took notes for a group, and I would say we had like 2 kinds of conversations. So one of them was about strategies for inviting broader publics into this kind of work, and one of them was about, like moments when that might feel like a sticky or complicated thing to do, and when it might make sense to keep something with a committed core. So maybe I'll start with the second one. Nicole spoke about doing community organizing work in the context of rising fascism, right? So the context of our present, and how this raises questions about who to bring in, which is also a safety question at certain points, right? Whose voices should come to the fore and who should fall to the back at what times, and when to, like, when and what kinds of diversity to really cultivate. So the question of like a diversity of political positions came up, and the different kinds of work that can do. So I spoke about working with youth organizers who sometimes, when they would invite in broader publics, would get like really patronizing advice that sort of derailed important conversations. And what I learned from being in that space about how to structure broader public involvement, and when to hold certain conversations a little closer. And then Daniel gave us a few like really useful concrete strategies for thinking about how to do this work based on the work he's doing with his org. So one thing that they're doing is staging a kind of story time where they're building community by talking together around particular like themes associated with connection to place. And they're also doing what he called eco quests, which are essentially micro immersions. So really in the spirit of the call we had on Tuesday of last week. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Really love the idea of those moments where you need to spotlight other voices, youth and BIPOC individuals coming very to mind. Beautiful. Thank you. And moving to room 6, Anna, Cheryl, and Will.
So we had some difficulties on our end because one of our people dropped off, and Will, I think, couldn't speak verbally on the call and was also posing questions about ableism in sociocracy, but we didn't get to hear very much more details on that. So Will, if you still can't speak, maybe you want to drop that in the chat if you'd love to, because I'm sure that's a really important comment that we'd all love to be a part of. I feel like we didn't get very far, and I'm sort of listing like random things at random of things I know work well for onboarding. And there's been so much that has been said here that's, I think, really, really essential to when you're first starting out. And I guess I want to add some things that are like, once you sort of have a group going, some things that are really valuable. And the first is to have your points of unity like written down and decided on, like what are the non-negotiables, what are you here to do? The second thing is form follows function, understanding that you need a certain amount of structure to be able to do the kinds of things you're doing, but what projects you're actually undertaking need to determine the sort of structure you have. The third is just like a little hack for organizing, that if you're sending around a sign-up sheet, if you're like tabling an event, and people want to maybe get involved, have a spot where they can write down their skills and their interests, because that can make it much easier to onboard people. And having like a designated person who onboards people, or like have that be a role that is fulfilled, because it's so typical that you end up in an organization where everyone's volunteering and they're strapped for time and resources, and you need more people, and there's people who want to get involved, but nobody has the capacity to onboard them. So making sure that there is like an established process, especially if there's like readings people need to do or trainings people need to do. If you're using sociocracy, do you have links to people to get onboarded that process on their own? Do you have kind of foundational texts or perspectives you're working with of like, hey, if you want to get involved, make sure, here's what you need to read first. Like having as much of that as possible articulated, but understanding too that like it's an iterative process. As new people come in, the group will change, the dynamics will change, the culture will change, and the projects may change. So just like, that keeping the thing is, there's no right way to start a circle. There's no like obvious point from which to begin. So just being mindful of like, do what you can for what you need, and then let the process go through its natural evolution, but being as conscious around that as possible. Did I miss anything, folks? We didn't really get to talk about much, so sorry.
Well, Susie, thank you so much. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and take a deep breath for all of those shares and all of that brainstorming. Just come back into the group space. Okay, is Misha on the call and available to do the artistic closeout? Just checking. Okay. All right, no worries. I have a backup plan. Okay. And then I'm going to ask for someone to do, if someone's interested in leading the grounding practice next time, if you want to throw your name in the chat. So I would love someone to do a grounding practice, someone to be tech support, and I have Corey as a backup if needed. And then I would love someone to do an artistic closeout next time. So I don't want to take a ton of time here, but if you want to throw your name in the chat, if you're interested in one of those things. And then next time is May 9th, and Jan Inglis is going to do a presentation on land acknowledgement practices. And then Brandon is going to give a presentation on open space facilitation and spokes models of government. So those will be very interesting for next time. And then I will just spend a moment with this poem. This is one I wrote actually after my very first time at Lost Valley. So just to send us off here. Okay. The land returns us. Sing to plump hawthorn berries, red, so good for the heart. Leave a strand of hair or even the body's water as a gift to blackberries. See with only periphery until vision narrows to pounce this imaginary mouse. Feed and clean for 30 with food pulled gently from ground. Everyone has something to teach, to learn. Breathe in fast, out slow. Moon bathe noon under stars and wake early to blow on hot coals in this natural sauna, lit only with dawn. Clear the underbrush and stockpile for next year's winter. The camas meadow defines abundance. Bury ritual ash under the tree most decorated with guardian oak. A moth lands to bless this gift. Sit around fire and talk, rub shoulders, listen to silence between bouts of laughter, and know that we all have grief we carry. 2 deer are claimed by the land. Become changed with every inhale of sweetgrass, bee balm, lavender. Give freely, accept deeply. All right, thank you so much for everyone and your willingness to be here on this call. And please do send me a message if you're interested in leading grounding practice or an artistic closeout. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you on the webinars or in a couple weeks on this call again. Have a great day.